Have you ever experienced irritations when working with colleagues with another cultural background? Last week, I've already been talking about individualism versus collectivism. And another cultural dimension mentioned by Gert Hofstede is the one with power distance. And he distinguishes between a low power distance and a high power distance. So, what's the difference? In a country with a low power distance, everybody kind of is equal. Whereas in land with a higher power distance, if you are the boss of a company, you have much more rights and you are also much more important. In a country with a high power distance, the people who are the bosses in the company, they have certain privileges. So, for example, the car of the CEO is the first one standing to the entrance. Very often, it's also the biggest. And in countries with a high power distance, it's really important to show the status with the car. I know companies that you really have some regulations that you can't choose the car that you want. So I'm just taking an Audi as an example. So if you are the biggest boss, maybe you have an Audi A8 and then it goes down maybe to a team member with Audi A2. I don't know. It's only a good example just to show what is possible and what isn't. In a country with a high power distance, it's also usual that the bosses gives an instruction and the employee has to do what the boss says, nevertheless, if this instruction makes sense or not. There are other things that are shown in cultures with a high power distance. In one of my workshops, we did a role play, as I do it very often, because for me, role plays are really good examples to demonstrate things. We had one student from a country with a high power distance, and in this role play, he was the boss. And there was a student, and another student, she came from a culture with a low power distance, and she was the employee. So we did our setup. There was a table, and there was a chair behind the table and in front of the table. And the student with a high power distance, he was sitting behind the desk. The student from the culture with a low power distance, she kind of knocked on the door. So she knocked on the wall and was waiting for him to call her in. And he was sitting in his desk and pretending to write or to do something. And she was standing there and waiting. And he was writing, and nothing happened. And after a while, she looked at me, a little bit helpless, and her eyes were asking me, what can I do? He doesn't react. And so with my eyes, I also told her with this gesture just to knock again. So she knocked again. And after a while, he looked up, looked at her, and said, come in. She came in. And in her country, it would have been usual that he would offer her a seat, but he didn't. So she remained standing in front of him while he was giving his instructions. After this role play, we have been reflecting it because the student from the country with a low power distance, she was really irritated because she found it very rude that he didn't offer her a seat. And he was astonished that the student from the country with a low power distance called him rude because he said, in my country, that's normal. The boss has to say or can decide everything, and the employees really have to do what the boss says. For him, it was very, very unusual to sit at the same eyesight. So what about your country? Is it a country with low or with high power distance? As to Germany, I would say that things have changed in the last maybe 30 or 40 years. When I started working, I know that an insurance company next to where I live, they had also different symbols for statues. So very often it is that the CEO has really the biggest office, the biggest desk, and there's also a very good chair standing behind the desk, and the one in front of the desk for the employees or for visitors, it has a completely other quality. So already to show who is the boss. So on this insurance company, they had something more subtle. They had lamps, and on the lamps you have this kind of tissue, and that was the same in every office. What was different? It was the where the lamp was standing on, or where it was put in. So depending on the position of the boss, it was or in wood or in acrylic, and one way you could look through, or it was in a silver material, so that every employee could see at first sight which hierarchy this person had. There's another very typical thing for a culture with a high power distance. So, for example, if an employee, let's say from a lower level, has a question, and this question can only be answered from one of the directors. In a company with a high power distance, it wouldn't be possible that this employee asks the director directly. So it would be necessary to first ask the team, the team lead, and then go up. This question would go up to the same hierarchical level. And after that, the answer would kind of be given back to the employee at the lowest level. Those are all typical signs for a high power distance. Another thing that's kind of typical is that employees are not involved in decisions. Whereas in cultures with a low power distance, it's kind of natural that employees are asked, oh, what's your opinion? What do you think? Should we proceed like this? Or do you have another idea? This wouldn't be possible in a culture with a high power distance. So what does this mean for you? My experience is that I'm socialized with what I know from my culture, and it has helped me to know something about the culture before I travel there. It's not that it's really always important to have these, let's say, do's and don'ts. For me, that's sometimes very difficult because there's so much to remember. If I have a general idea, if this country has low or high power distance, then this kind of really helps me how to behave. So in English, you don't have the distinction between, let's say, you and you. But for example, in French, you have tu et vous. In German, you have du and sie. And this is also already a high power distance. And when I worked together with people from the United States, it was quite usual to call each other already with the first name. Sometimes there was a small exchange, but then everybody called the other person with the first name. In Germany, things are changing now. When I was young, it was very unusual to call somebody with the first name. And I remember that I'd been working as the assistant to the director of marketing and sales. And together with a colleague, she was in the sales department, we introduced at this time an IBM AS400. And we had to attend a course to learn something about this. And when we returned, we are the same age, we are still in contact, we are still friends. And after this week away, we realized that we kind of had a connection to each other. And so we became friends. And we agreed to call each other by the first name. And when I came back and my boss realized that I was calling this colleague by her first name, he really looked at me and said, "But you, as my assistants, I wouldn't have thought that you would call somebody from the sales department with a first name." So he was really astonished. It really helps me to know these things before I come to another culture, because then I know how I should behave, if I should be more, if I should have, let's say, also bigger distance, if I should be more open, if I can be more frankly. So what about your culture? And what about the culture you're living in at present? Do you have a low power distance? Do you have a high power distance? As usual, I will set the link to the page of Gert Hofstede in the comments below of this stream. And whenever you have a question, you can always contact me. Please let me know which your culture is, or low or high power distance, or if you have more questions to the cultural dimensions of Hofstede, or maybe you have something in the office that kind of irritates you and where you really would like to have an answer. Please send me an email. I will answer your email. And if you want to, I can also talk about this topic in this stream. Please always let me know what's up in your mind, what you would like to know, and what you really would like to know to bring more love and peace into your workplace and into your company. Love and peace to me also means to take care of myself. And so I have decided that there won't be a stream next week, so the week before Easter, and no stream in the week after Easter. The next stream will be on April 10th. And I do not know if you're celebrating Easter or not. If you're celebrating it, I already wish you happy Easter. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you on April 10th again. Have a good time.